I'm Sandra Mangini, and I'm with Houston Food Bank. And in collaboration with AARP Texas, we're bringing you these classes called Cooking for a Cause. And I do want to read you a message from AARP Texas. Our video is not working. Rosalinda Martinez is the coordinator I've been working with at AARP. And she I'm just going to read the statement. It's, thank you for joining us to this free virtual cooking class called Cooking for a Cause, brought to you by AARP in Houston and Houston Food Bank. This class aims to teach you how to cook healthy and tasty dishes from around the globe and to call attention to the need to help fill empty pantries. Many of those pantries belong to older residents, which the Houston Food Bank supports through donations. Before we get cooking, we have an important reminder about voting. So we all know that early voting started yesterday, October 23rd, and goes through October 30th. And election day is Tuesday, November 3rd. So let's get cooking. So I have, for those that arrived a little later, I put in the chat box the recipe, a handout on lentils, a handout on stocking your pantry, and the last one on food safety. And I may touch upon a few of those, but we're going to get to the recipes first, okay? I kind of talk throughout. Go ahead and jot down questions in the chat box, and then at the end we can discuss your questions. Okay, sound good? I think we're okay. So I'm going to start with the green spaghetti. So the idea of this class came to me was, you know, there are a lot of tips and tricks out there for meal planning, but a lot of them really are for when you have larger numbers, like you're a mom with a bunch of kids or a dad with a bunch of kids, and you know, you're trying to get all this stuff done, you don't have the time really to prepare. And so the quantities or some of the tips that I have seen out there, when I've done them, now that I cook for one or two people, I end up wasting a lot of food. And I am a big proponent on using everything and not wasting any food. So it's been an adjustment to kind of learn to cook for a large family to one or two people. So you have to take tips and tricks in mind for your personal situation. So one of the tips is plan for the week, right? Plan for the week works really well when I have a large number of people. But now I find that if I personally cook maybe 2 meals at the beginning of the week, that might last me for 4, maybe even 5 meals. So kind of zone in to your own situation and think about that. And that's what this is class is really about, is what are some of the you totally, I saw that chat. I had to read it for a second. Leftovers are great, yes. I feel like a lot of times we are pushed to use everything fresh, everything organic, everything this, everything that. And so I wanted to focus more on what can you stock in your kitchen that's easy. What can you use that you have, you know, what can you substitute? What can you use that you have in your pantry, your freezer, your fridge? So let's get cooking now. Sorry, I knew I had to get that in there. So we're going to start with the green spaghetti. And what I have going here is just a pot of salted water to make the spaghetti in. But before we actually make the spaghetti, if you look at that recipe called green spaghetti, you can, you know, it says to use whole wheat spaghetti, but if you're not a fan of whole wheat spaghetti, this is still a very healthy, and you know, you can use white spaghetti and then just add more vegetables. In this case, the sauce is made out of the greens, so it's going to already pack a punch of nutrition. So I'm going to be using whole wheat spaghetti to make this, but use what you like, because my motto is, if you don't like it, you're not going to eat it. So you can make adjustments. Recipes are guides that you tailor to your own needs. No one else is going to know, so who cares, right? We're not in a competition at the Food Network. So I'm going to start with, so I have my blender ready, because basically all this dish does is you boil the spaghetti, you make the sauce in the blender, you combine the two. So the first thing I want to do, and the only reason you don't have to do this part, this is called blanching. So I'm going to blanch. I have spinach. You can use kale. You can use any greens that you like. You could use just herbs, a combination of parsley and basil, leafy herbs, not like rosemary, because that would be too difficult to blend, but probably more leafy herbs. You could do a Latin, twist with cilantro and maybe jalapeno. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to blanch these leaves, because what blanching does, if I for 30 seconds for the spinach, is it retains, keeps the nutrition locked in, and it brightens the color. And we all know, especially with children, green is not everybody's favorite color when it comes to food. So the brighter the green, the more appealing. We eat with our senses, the more appealing it is in the end. So I'm just going to dump these in here real quick. This is going to be for the pasta. And so I'm literally doing this for about 30 seconds. I have a slotted spoon, and it's going to go straight into my blender cup. So I would say, depending on the size, if I'm using baby spinach, it's not going to take as long. Rougher spinach, bigger regular spinach might be thicker. You might need to do it a minute. And I am just going to stick it in here. You don't really have to drain it because we need liquid in the sauce. So go ahead and let me do this. Kale is a really good substitute too. The leaves are a little bit bigger, so you don't have to fish it out so much. Okay? So just get the rest of the leaves out. There we go. And let's get that. Okay. We're going to set that aside, and we're going to go ahead. I'm going to do this, but then I'm going to move my pan to my kitchen stove so I have more room here. But I have just a handful. I'm not using as much as the recipe because I don't want to waste. So I'm just using a handful of spaghetti. I'm going to put it in there whole. I love to use tongs. This is already boiling, by the way. I know you can't see that, but I like to use tongs to just stir it in. And you can, even if it's sticking out a little bit, it bends at the bottom, so then you can just quickly kind of twist and turn it and get it stirred in, and it will start boiling and cooking. This particular spaghetti that I'm doing will probably take about 9 minutes. So we'll make the sauce while that's cooking. I'm going to move it over, and I'll be right back. Let's put it over here. All right. So I have that cooking over there, and lower this. And so what I want to show you is we have the spinach in here, and all we're going to do is basically add all the other ingredients. So we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And remember, if you like more or less of something, you can substitute, more or less. Or you can, I'm using walnuts, for example. You can use any kind of nuts. Traditional, this is basically like a pesto. Traditional pesto is usually basil, pine nuts, olive oil, garlic, and some kind of hard cheese, and some type of liquid. In this case would be the olive oil, and some lemon juice. I'm using walnuts, so I'm using spinach, walnuts. I'm going to put all of that in there. We're going to add some lemon juice. So I'm adding about the juice of 1 lemon. We're going to add 4 cloves of garlic. If you don't like garlic as much, or you want something a little milder, use less, or you can also substitute garlic powder. The texture might be a little bit different. We're going to add in basil leaves. Now, I am a huge, huge proponent of using the stems. The stems carry a lot of nutrition in any plant to the leaf. So using the stem has a lot of flavor. So just throw it in there. It's going to get blended. It's clean. There's no reason to toss those stems. And then we're going to add the cheese. So I'm actually using Parmesan and the ricotta. Let's see, did we forget anything? No. And I'm going to mute you for a minute while I blend this, because this blender is very, very loud. I'm muting myself, not you. So give me 1 second to blend it, and I will show you. Again, the Parmesan has some salt. So I'm not going to put any salt until I taste it. So we'll see, because I'm not a big fan of using too much salt. So here we go. I'm going to mute you for 1 second. Okay, I'm back. So all I did was blend that up, and it's a beautiful green color. Now, you could have also blanched the basil. Usually I do them both, but I honestly just forgot. So you don't have to do that, but it really, really is just super easy. Now, all you really are doing is waiting for the spaghetti and then mixing it together. So I'm going to take a look at the time. Give me 1 second. And I'm going to strain the spaghetti and then bring it and show you how I would do it at home. But you can see this is really less than 15 minutes. If you have everything prepared, the sauce takes a second. You warm it up in the pan. The spaghetti is made. 1 sec. Okay. We'll be right back. So. And, oh, I want to get let's use this guy. Come on. All right. So what I'm going to do is in the same pot, we're going to warm some of the sauce along with the cooked spaghetti, okay? So pour your sauce into the pan as much as you can. And I probably made too much for the amount of spaghetti I have, but that's okay. You can always reserve some, right? So I'm warming up the sauce, and let me show you, just so, see how hot this is? So you can see, I still have a spaghetti in there, and that's all I'm doing. Gonna put the pasta in and just stir it up. It's very, very green, and that's why I like to call it green spaghetti. And then we're just gonna take it out. Now, if you like less sauce, feel free to use less. This is definitely way too much for the amount of spaghetti I made, but here it gives you an idea. Oh, I did forget one thing. If you feel like your sauce needs more water, make sure to reserve some of the pasta water and just add it in. Just a little bit, like maybe a teaspoon at a time, tablespoon at a time. So we have one more person. Let me let them in, sorry. So yeah, somebody else is joining us. So this is the green spaghetti. And you know, the garnishes that you use, they can add so much flavor to any dish. So in this case, this is such an easy dish. I like to liven it up, not just with Parmesan, so I'm putting a little Parmesan. I actually toasted some almonds, and I think that's a wonderful garnish. It gives some crunch and some more added like nutty flavor or earthy flavor. And for a little bit of a kick, I'm putting a few, what do you call them? Red chili flakes. If you like, you can drizzle a tiny bit of vinegar or more olive oil and salt and pepper. So that's really the dish. It's making the sauce in the blender, adding it to cooked spaghetti, and you're done. So this dish, just so you know nutrition-wise, white over wheat spaghetti, the biggest difference, they have a very similar makeup in a lot of things, but the biggest difference is fiber. So I do know a lot of people don't like whole wheat pasta. So if you don't, that doesn't mean you shouldn't eat your white pasta. You can eat your white pasta, but just bulk it up with vegetables and you'll get more fiber. So, and something that you will actually prefer to eat versus, you know, something that somebody's telling you to eat. So it's important. Food is so fun and important, but it's not going to be, you're not going to like it. if there are ingredients and things in it that you don't like, you're not going to eat it. So that's recipe number one. Just so you know, the spinach has a vitamin K, which is wonderful for bone health, vitamin A, which is great for immunity and good vision, and potassium and magnesium, which are electrolytes our body needs to keep and support a healthy heart. Okay, so dish one. We doing okay, everybody? Yes, it's a variation of a regular pesto, Harry. And mix, yeah, you could mix both pastas together. I love that. I absolutely love that. Let me move this and make some space for the next. It's so personal, you being in my home. It's so interesting. I love it. All right, we're gonna move this over too. And so I wanted to include one no-cook recipe because I think, you know, a quick meal, a lot of times you can have stuff in your pantry. So like I was saying, the sheet that has stocking a healthy pantry and fridge is a really, really good document. And it talks a lot about making sure to keep things in your pantry like canned goods and things in your freezer. A lot of people are squeamish about those things because they might have preservatives. So when you shop, if you're shopping canned, for example, canned beans, you can buy no salt added. It's perfectly, the nutrition is the same as if you use dried beans. The difference might be a little bit in texture and the fact that they might add salt. So if you buy the no salt added, then you are eliminating that. If you can't find a no salt added, then you can just rinse and drain your can of beans. So for the next recipe, I used a can of lentils. Lentils are actually one of the easier beans to cook, but they vary on type. So, but for this recipe, I wanted to show you how you could make a quick salad with a can of lentils, a frozen bag of mango, and then a few fresh ingredients. So let me grab the rest of them. And here we go. Lentils are wonderful. They have been around for about, I think people have been eating them all over the world for about 10,000 years. That's a lot of years. And they are part of a, you know, they are a pulse literally because they're a dry seed of a lentil plant. And the pulses are part of the legumes. So there's a whole way of categorizing this that's really interesting. But they're loaded with protein and fiber, and they fill you up. And so it's a wonderful plant-based protein that you can get if you want to have a meatless Monday or something like that. So what I've done here is I put 1 can of lentils. Oh, and on the sheet I created for you, it's a lentil, what we call a lentil tip sheet. Try to get it closer. At the bottom, I included a section on how to cook lentils on the stove. Now, there is one thing I always, when you're dealing with beans that are dry, age of the bag of the product and age of the beans makes a huge difference. So say, I don't know if you've ever had the issue where you've made whatever bean and you're like, wait a minute, this is taking so much longer than usual. Well, if you've had that bag of beans for a long time, it just takes longer to cook. So that's why we give variations in the recipe. Like I'll say brown lentils might take 20 to 30 minutes. It depends on equipment. It depends on the age of what your product is. So anyway, so we have 1 can of beans. Okay, and to it, what I did was last night I thawed a bag of just regular mango chunks. The chunks were kind of big, and for me, when I make a recipe, I like similar sizes. I mean, lentils are pretty tiny, so I did these into a small dice. I drained them because when you do thaw them, they get a lot of liquid, and I didn't want a really soupy kind of, you know, salad. So we're gonna add the mango in here. And mango is so wonderful because it's loaded with vitamin C, vitamin A, B vitamins, fiber, and antioxidants. And it's just sweet and beautiful, you know? I just love it. So that is a great thing to add. So right now you have a protein and you have a fruit already in this dish. This dish actually covers all parts of my plate. If you're familiar with my plate, it's protein, dairy, fruit, vegetable, and, oh, 4 parts, sorry, no grains, but you could throw it over rice and then you got your grain. So I took a small to medium red bell pepper, and that adds a nice sweetness, and I diced that, and we're gonna put that in there. This is one of the most beautiful dishes, honestly. And then I'm going to add, it's a little bit of garlic. So it's about, I like garlic, so I put 2 cloves, but it says 1 clove, but you judge it. You don't have fresh garlic, use some garlic powder. Again, one of the things I love to stress is it's probably better for you to use garlic powder because it doesn't have any salt. If you use garlic salt, you're adding more salt. if that's all you have, go ahead and use the garlic salt. Just be mindful that you may not need to add more salt. So again, garlic is going in there. And we have, so the spices that I have in here is cumin, chili powder, pepper, and salt. There are some nice like chipotle blends, Latin blends, things like that that you can purchase, and like Mrs. Dash, I believe, has like a no salt added. Other brands also have, I think, certain store brands might have no salt added. So, but if not, it's very easy. So just add in, it's a half teaspoon of cumin, half teaspoon of chili powder, a quarter of salt, a quarter of black pepper. Now, it's a quarter of salt doesn't sound like a lot for a salad, but what this takes into account is that we're going to be adding feta, and feta is quite a salty cheese. There's somebody there now. So I'm adding that. Do you see how pretty it is? Isn't that beautiful? And now I'm gonna do, before I add the feta, I'm gonna do 1 squeeze of a whole lime. There we go, because this lime is actually pretty juicy. So, you know, limes with thinner skins tend to have a little more juice than when they're the bumpy, thicker skin, but sometimes you're not 100% sure. So always try to do 1/2 first, see how much juice you get out of it, and then do the other half, because sometimes you need double what they say, only because some limes are really, really dry. Okay, so we're gonna put that in there. And now I'm gonna add the feta cheese. If you don't like feta, don't put it in. You know, that's that, or if you have an intolerance to dairy, don't put it in. It's a nice mild, the type I buy is a nice mild sheep's cheese. And look how pretty we're getting there. And then the very last tip is cilantro leaves, okay? So I'm putting, it's about 1/2 cup of cilantro leaves. But if you don't like cilantro, you could substitute parsley. You could also or basil. It just really depends. You kind of want to go with the profile of what you're making. In this case, we have Latin spices, so cilantro goes really well, but parsley, a lot of Latin countries use parsley or basil as well. So there you go. And you see, this is taking 1 can of beans, 1 frozen bag of mango, a few fresh ingredients that take 5 minutes to chop up, and mixing it together. I will tell you that if you leave this refrigerated, you know, for a few hours, it just the flavors meld together a lot better. So it is beautiful. Yeah. How are we doing? How is everybody doing? Anybody have any questions? I'm trying not to rush, but it always seems like we have more time than we do. Anyone have good? Thumbs up? All right, I love it. All right, so let me move that over and get readjusted, and I'll be right with you. It's here. Okay. So let's move this out of the way. Give me 1 second. So, sorry. Okay. It's a lot of ingredients. It seems like a lot of ingredients. This isn't obviously for you to do all at once or for one meal. I just wanted to give you options. So make sure you know, if you decide to do one or the other or none, you know, you have various ideas of what you can do. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is, let me get these guys on here. And let's get this guy moving. Okay, so let me give you a couple other tips. Like we said, you know, keep your pantry stocked, very, very important. For meal prep, I use a slow cooker a lot. Let me know if any of you use slow cookers or Instapots. Instapots are very popular. I do tend to use a smaller one now. Before I had a really big one when I had my kids at home and all that. But now, you know, just cooking for 2, it's like I use a much smaller one, because I find that if I make too much of one thing, even if I freeze it, I get sick of it. So you really have to know yourself, right? I don't know if that happens to anybody else. Oh, one thing I wanted to tell you about lentils before I forget. So, because I always have this question about the different types of lentils. So you have brown, you have green, you have black, you have red, and you have yellow. And what is really the major difference? So the brown one is the most common, and it's the most versatile, and it has the mildest flavor probably. But you can pretty much use it across the board, from salad to soup to, just a stew maybe. The red and the yellow tend to be mushier when you cook them and cook faster. So they're really, really good for stews and soups. And I know the yellow one is used in dal, I believe, which is that Indian lentil. I want to say it's a stew, but it looks more like a sauce, so I'm not 100% sure. And then the green and the black are firmer in texture, so they make really, really good for salad. So we could have used those in this salad. The black one almost looks like caviar. I believe it's the most expensive, but I do think the brown is the most common for many reasons, including price. So just wanted to point that out before we got into something else. And pesto for the spaghetti, see, I'm forgetting things, originated in, let's see if I can say it, Liguria, Italy. And it consisted, the traditional one, like I told you, was garlic, pine nuts, hard cheese, basil, and olive oil. But now you're seeing all sorts of pestos out there, from sun-dried tomato to one that doesn't even have basil in it, just other things. So lots of versatility, right? Okay, so, and one other thing that I wanted to tell you is, if you keep your kitchen organized, I have literally done this during quarantine. I went through and inventoried my pantry to see what I had in there, because I was finding that I was buying twice. I would go to the store and couldn't remember if I had certain things. And what I've done is my pantry is over here, and I don't know if you can see this, but there's the door. I went through the pantry, organized it, and I literally just wrote up everything I had in there and taped it to the inside of the door. As I use it, I mark it off, and then in a few months, I'll redo it. And the truth is, it was really fast to do the first time. The first time takes a little bit, but then it'll be faster the next few times. So that is another tip that you can definitely do. Okay, so we're gonna start with the warm gazpacho. So gazpacho originated in Andalusia, and my family is from Spain, so that's why my accent comes out like that. Andalusia, Spain. And the original gazpacho didn't have tomatoes in it. It actually had garlic, stale bread, some form of liquid, and olive oil, I believe, or oil at the time. So with time, and they used to mash it up, I think, with a mortar and a pestle. With time, it's evolved, and now it usually has a base of a vegetable or a fruit or both, because gazpacho, the traditional one that we think about now when we think about it, is tomato, but there are white gazpachos made out of grapes and cucumber, peeled cucumber, and that's why it stays white. So there are all sorts of, I've seen red pepper gazpacho, I've seen all sorts. So I wanted to present something that you could really do warm and cold, because we are getting into the colder season in Houston. And the version that I am making for you does not have bread. Okay, so the original did have stale bread. It was probably used to get rid of stale bread. But you can add bread to this if you want. I'll just let you know how we're gonna do it when we make the cold gazpacho. So what we're gonna do for the warm one, give me 1 second. We're gonna use these 2 pots and an immersion blender. Use whatever you have. Just for the class, I had to pull out my food processor, my regular blender, and then an immersion blender, so I wouldn't have to stop in between. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna add a little bit of oil to the pan, and I'm gonna saute. Now, I'm only sauteing the onions, the red pepper, the tomatoes, and the garlic. The cucumber, you can. People are not used to eating, sauteed cucumber, but in a lot of Asian foods, they do cook the cucumber. It takes on the flavors of anything else that's around it. So it's real versatile in that, but it gives a nice freshness and crispness to it if you eat it raw. So for For me personally, I'm not going to saute it for this particular one, but you can if you want. Again, there really is no wrong. So I'm going to throw in the red onion first. I'm going to saute that first. And you can't hear this. I don't think you can hear it, but it is sizzling. So we're going to do that. You can use canned tomatoes in this if you want, to make it even faster. You know, the biggest part of this is probably chopping things up. And let me get this guy going real quick. And this one. All right. So we have the onion in here. And I would probably saute it for about a minute or two. Make sure nobody else is there. Okay. So we're going to get that going. This pan is taking a bit to warm up. And really, on the recipe, it said, I think, chopped or diced. Because this is going to get blended, it really doesn't matter. It's really up to you if you want to chop it really small. You could probably just quarter it, and it'll take longer to cook. But honestly, if it's going to get blended, it doesn't really matter what it looks like. So, and then we're going to add the garlic. So I'm adding just some chopped garlic. And then, and with the garlic, usually I do about a minute just to let it get fragrant. How are we doing on time? We're good. I'm going to add some bell peppers. So the recipe, what I've done for this recipe is I've divided it into two. So if some things look smaller, it's just because I'm making it two ways. But you could do one or the other with the amount of ingredients that I put on the recipe too. So everybody doing okay? Anybody need anything? Anybody have questions? I wish you were here cooking with me. That would definitely be fun, wouldn't it? Oh, I did want to tell you while this is cooking, the sixth class on December 9th, we will be giving away a grand prize, but you have to attend that class to the end, and then we'll be drawing a name based off of the list of attendees that day. And the grand prize is going to be an Instapot and a class with me, a personal class with me. We would customize whatever it is you want to learn how to make. And we would probably do the class in January, mid to late January. But you have to be present to win. So definitely come to that class if you can. Okay, so this is just sauteing. So we're just sauteing the onion, the garlic, and the pepper. And now I'm using grape tomatoes because right now we're at the end of the peak season for tomatoes. So the grape ones seem to have the most flavor. So I'm adding those. But again, something I wanted to tell you a little bit about canned versus fresh tomatoes. Canned tomatoes actually have more vitamin C than fresh, and have lycopene, which is an antioxidant that helps with various kinds of cancers. But I think I said that backwards. Sorry, it has lycopene, cooked tomatoes, but as you cook it, it decreases the amount of vitamin C. Pardon me, I said it backwards because there's so much information. So sometimes it's really important to think about how you're eating something and eat it in different forms. Don't just all the time say, oh, I'm only going to eat raw tomatoes. I'm only going to eat cooked tomatoes, unless you actually have an aversion. But sometimes you can actually mix. So in this gazpacho, I'm cooking the tomatoes, but I could garnish it with some fresh chopped tomatoes. And then I'm getting a bit of both things. Plus, you know, other fruits and vegetables that are in here have other vitamins and antioxidants. Okay, so while this guy is cooking, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these ingredients. Now I have my food processor over here. I don't know if you can see that. And, oh, one last thing. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and, like we talked before about the stems of different herbs, I'm going to saute the basil with the stems in the cooked one. And I'm just gonna, I didn't really chop it, I just tore the leaves off and the stems, and I'm going to add that too. So I wanted to make sure you got that in there. And I'm on about medium heat right now. So, all right, so and I know I'm going back and forth, but we're trying to maximize on time here. So I wanna make sure we get both recipes in. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do this over here again. I'm going to take the tomatoes and the garlic and the red onion and the cucumbers and peppers, I'm just going to pulse it in this blender. Gazpacho is so easy. If I were to add bread, what I would do is I would pulse all these ingredients, then I would stick the bread. Usually it tends to be white bread, the inside, not so much the crust. You could use the crust for something else, maybe like a topping. You could crush it up and put it on top of the gazpacho. That way you don't waste the crust. But what you do with this gazpacho, if you want to add bread, is go ahead and stick it in the liquid that you've blended and let it soak for about 1 to 2 minutes, depending on the size, and then pulse it in. So the bread is what gives the typical traditional gazpacho texture, okay? But I wanted to do a different version without the bread. So instead, we're gonna top it with bread, okay? So this guy is cooking. We're just gonna let it cook for probably just a few minutes, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, okay? Now, I wish you could see all of this, but this kitchen isn't very big, so. So what I'm doing is I have the bowl for the food processor, and I'm adding the tomatoes and the onions. I have the red pepper. I know a lot of traditional gazpacho uses green pepper, but I have the issue that it gives me a little bit of reflux. So I prefer to use red pepper, doesn't do that to me, and it gives it a little bit of sweetness that balances with the acidity of the tomato. So, and then I added cucumber. All right, you can hear that, and then the garlic is over here. Okay, and don't forget the olive oil. So you definitely want to add olive oil, and we're gonna pulse it. Some traditional recipes also call for a red wine or a sherry vinegar. You can do that if you want. I kind of like to taste it and see if I'm gonna add that added vinegar or not. Vinegar is a wonderful thing if you use it in moderation to bring out flavors, kind of like lemon juice. You know, lemon juice is something we use definitely to bring out flavors. All right, so let me make sure I don't add a little bit more because I know I used up the wrong amount. And I'm gonna pulse it. I'm going to mute you again just so you don't hear this because it's pretty loud. Give me 1 second. So all I'm doing is pulsing it. If you want a smoother gazpacho, pulse it longer and maybe add a tiny bit more liquid. But if you want a chunkier one, like I prefer it a little bit chunkier, then I'm just gonna pulse it a little bit and I don't necessarily want it smooth. And I'll show you that in a minute. Give me 1 second. Actually, I didn't mute you, did I? It's not even that loud. My blender is super loud, so I'm pulsing it so that I don't puree it too much, you know? And I think for me, that is good. Yeah, I like it like that. So, let me get a bowl and take this out and show you. So here is the cold gazpacho. I'm gonna season it with a bit of salt, bit of pepper. I actually do like to drizzle as a garnish a little bit of vinegar on top. So it just depends. And I'm going to garnish this one with some fresh, I'll show you at the very end, the fresh cucumber and some fresh red onion. So if you want to see right there, if you can see, I'm going to bring it closer. Hold on. Let's put it right on top of the camera so you can see. There you go. Looking nice? All right. So really, it's a lot faster. I mean, this one takes a little bit longer because it's cooking. So now this is cooked for probably about a good 10 minutes. I'm gonna put it in something where I can blend it. So this, oh, I forgot this guy's getting really hot. I'm gonna move him over. And again, we're gonna have to add some liquid. that it was on. It happens. Okay, so all I'm doing is now I'm going to add the cucumber so that at least it gets warm and doesn't warm, you know, make your soup hot. And I'm going to, let me do it over here where I won't burn it because it's super, super hot. I'm going to blend it with my immersion blender. So, and we'll add a little salt and pepper after. Give me a second. I should have done this one backwards. I should have used the blender for this one. It just takes a little bit longer when you use these kind of blenders, but I wanted to make this one just a little smoother than the other one and kind of show them to you side by side. But I used that blender for the green sauce, so it's dirty. All right. Almost there. Everybody doing okay? Let me see. To clarify, you said canned tomatoes have more, they have lycopene. So lycopene is antioxidant that is they've shown that it has a correlation to reducing risk of prostate cancer and I believe other kinds of cancers too. I hope that answers your question. But as you cook a tomato, it decreases, I think by 10% the vitamin C that's in the tomato when it's fresh. Sorry about that, I know. And we're almost done and I'll have time for some questions, some more questions. So the truth is what happened here, I'm gonna make it chunky just for time's sake, but let me get that out. And let me get a bowl and a ladle. So this one, again, you would add the bread to it as well. I actually have one really big stem in here because the immersion blender doesn't like to. Oh, somebody's there with us. Hold on, let me admit. Okay. So, and I'm going to top it with red onion and cucumber and a piece of bread and drizzle it with a little bit of olive oil. And I'm going to show you both a little bit closer. Let me see. So we have the cold, sorry, let me put that one down because that's hot. I'm going to see if I can lean the camera. The cold gazpacho and the warm one. So it really is just a matter of preference, honestly. And I believe, let me see if there was anything else. Let me tell you a couple of other meal planning tips, sorry, is definitely use a list, not just a list at the grocery store, but like I said earlier, keep a basic list of your basic things that you have in your house, in your freezer. You know, do you have fresh, frozen vegetables, frozen grains. So now that I've really gotten into using frozen brown rice, frozen white rice, I just read the ingredients and make sure there's not a bunch of salt or anything like that in there. I also always keep frozen fruits, frozen vegetables, and I freeze a bunch of stuff when I have leftovers. Just depends on how big your freezer is. In the fridge, I do like to keep certain condiments like mustard and ketchup and Asian flavored like hoisin sauce and things like that, because you can really, if you start like with a protein, if you start your meal thinking about your meal, okay, what's the protein going to be? I'm going to do canned beans or lentils in that case. Well, I'm going to build around it. So I have a protein, let me add a fruit, let me add a vegetable. Let me add 3 things. So let me do vegetable and a dairy, or vegetable and a grain, or fruit and a grain, you know, whatever it is that you like. So a formula, kind of a very loose formula, helps me organize my kitchen, helps me meal prep, and honestly, quarantine has helped me a ton, just eating a lot more at home, even though I've noticed over time that now when I do pick up any takeout or anything like that, my taste buds have changed, and I notice the salt a lot more in takeout food than I used to. So, and then just make it simple. You know, make make what you like, make it simple. If you don't have an ingredient, substitute, substitute, substitute. Don't think you have to go get that. You know, unless it's like the main thing, like you're making roasted chicken and you don't have the chicken, that's different. So, and then vary your techniques. Another thing I have really learned to use is my microwave. I love micro steaming vegetables. So I will get broccoli or cauliflower or broccolini or any of those things. I'll put it in a bowl with a little bit of water. I will cover it with a paper towel, a damp paper towel, and just nuke it for, depending if I do it on the lower, I'll do it for maybe 3 to 5 minutes. On a higher setting, maybe 1 to 2 minutes. So I've learned to do that so that I might be cooking a protein, have frozen vegetables and microwaved, frozen grains and microwave vegetables. So just a little bit on that.